Hello. Good evening, everyone. Both to hear those here tonight in Doll Chapel and to our audience watching out there on the live stream. Thank you so much for being part of this community tonight. The Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies is honored to host this exciting installment of the Thompson Lecture Series. The Thompson Lecture Series is named in the honor of Sam Thompson, who served Monmouth's College Philosophy Department for an incredible 46 years. A graduate of Monmouth College himself in 1924, he went on to earn both his MA and PhD in philosophy from Princeton University. Among his many contributions to the field are two influential textbooks, A Modern Philosophy of Religion and The Nature of Philosophy. Since his passing in 1983, the series has continued through the generosity of his daughters, Jean Thompson Follett and Roberta Thompson Fassett, both Monmouth alumni. Tonight, we are thrilled to welcome Trina M. Robinson as our speaker. Trina is a San Francisco-based multimedia artist whose work powerfully bridges personal history, collective memory, and social justice. Her projects reclaim and reimagine stories that have been marginalized or forgotten. She challenges us to reflect on identity, memory, and the passage of time, but more on that soon. To introduce Trina, I am pleased to welcome Nathaniel Rodriguez. Nathaniel is a double major in business administration and marketing with a minor in religious studies and philosophy. He grew up in both Belize and Illinois, so his own story maps onto the theme of migration, which will be a focus tonight. In addition to his academic pursuits, Nathaniel works as a student success ambassador, Stockdale manager, and is part of an audiovisual team, so he's here. He was up there earlier helping us, so all of this work in technology tonight is really through his grace. He is also involved with the Lux program, a program led by Dr. Reverend John Huxtable that explores the connections between spirituality and ethical leadership. As someone who's had the pleasure of working closely with Nathaniel over the past year, I can truly say that he embodies the characteristics of a brilliant liberal arts student, equally capable of critical and creative thought and driven by a boundless curiosity. So please join me tonight in welcoming Nathaniel, who will in turn introduce tonight's speaker.
Good evening, everyone attending and watching online. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the 2025 Thompson Lecture. For this year's lecture, we have the honor of welcoming Trina Robinson, an acclaimed artist, storyteller, and educator whose interdisciplinary work profoundly resonates with the spirit of a liberal arts education. Through multimedia art, historiography, and storytelling, Trina explores the relationship between memory and migration, examining how fractured, folded, and glitched fragments of memory can release trauma and recover lost narratives. Trina's work has been featured in group and solo exhibitions at prominent cultural institutions across the country, including the Catherine Clark Gallery in San Francisco, the Museum of the African Diaspora, a Smithsonian affiliate, ICA San Jose, the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Arlington, Virginia. Upcoming exhibitions include Black Gold at Foresight, Fort Point, Presidio, and Paper is People, Decolonizing Global Paper Cultures at the Robert C. Williams Museum of Papermaking at Georgia Tech. Among her many distinctions, Trina was a finalist for the SFMOMA-SECA Award and was shortlisted for the CPW Vision Award for Emerging Photographers. She has held residencies at esteemed institutions such as the Kala Art Institute in Berkeley, California, the Lost and Found Lab at Yale University's Beinecke Library, and the Black Space Residency at Minnesota Street Project Studios in San Francisco. Beyond her visual art, Trina is also a captivating storyteller who has traveled the country with the Moth main stage, sharing stories about exploring her ancestry at iconic venues like Lincoln Center in New York, as well as stages in San Francisco, Portland, Omaha, and West Point, Connecticut. Her story was featured on NPR's The Monmouth Radio Hour in 2019, reaching audiences far and wide. While Trina's work is deeply personal, the themes she gives voice to, questions of identity, the malleability of history, and the search to find connection and community are universal. Despite our different backgrounds, I know that I found much in her work that inspires and resonates with me. I have no doubt we all will. We are truly fortunate to have Trina with us today to share her work, story, and wisdom. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Trina.
Again, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm just so excited to be speaking to you all today. I'll get started. Before I go through the slides, I do want to say a little brief background about how I got to this point. I did have a full career. I'm actually from Oak Park, Illinois, first of all, so I'm not that far away. Oh, are you from Oak Park? Oh, wow, well, yeah, and I was in college at DePaul University. So that's awesome to hear that. And I now live in San Francisco. I had a long career working in magazine publishing, and worked at the New York Times, T Magazine, which is a style magazine, and Vanity Fair, and then came here and worked at came to actually San Francisco and worked at a magazine called California Sunday, and then I got recruited by Slack, a tech company, because they were recruiting editorial people to try to editorialize their marketing content. And all the while I was doing those jobs, I was doing research for most of that time on my family's history. So what led me to my artistic career that we're going to talk about now, and how I've been exploring the arts, is when that photo album all of a sudden appeared that belonged to my family about 25 or so years ago. It was from the 30s or 40s. It turned up in the house next door to the home my mom grew up in on the south side of Chicago. They returned it to our house because the house my mom grew up in, we still own that house in my family, and then the neighbors from back then still own that house, so they just found this and brought it over. And I guess there was a flood in the basement, and so that's how it got there, and it was forgotten. And so when it was returned, they found all these old photographs from the 30s and 40s, but also newspaper clippings. And they started talking about all of these incredible histories and stories, and after a little bit of research, we found out that we were from Kentucky. And I was telling my mom this, and at first, that was not a story that was in their narrative, so, most people thought that wasn't true at first and weren't really sure what that was about. We thought it was maybe newspaper error or reporting error. But a lot more research uncovered that it actually was true. And that set me off on my journey, because it's just, the moment that information was found, it completely changed how I look at myself, and especially my place in this country and in this world. It gave me a sense of identity I didn't have before, and a stronger sense of self. So I'll start the slideshow, and we'll start digging into what that was and how I ended up switching to a whole career, going to grad school to get an MFA. I'm probably freaking out my entire family, and then just becoming an artist. So here we go. Okay, so the first film my first venture into the visual art world, this is when I was working at Slack. I had a little bit of a creative life before this, but I kind of gave it up because I loved working in magazine publishing, and I was working with brilliant people and working with amazing content, so I didn't feel I really needed to create because I was around such brilliant people and we were making this incredible product. When I got to Slack, I had been researching for over 20 years at that point, and I still was not having an issue digesting that content, because it was quite traumatic. And obviously I knew that was the descendant of enslaved people, but I think when I started doing that research and I saw my ancestors' names next to a $ and an estate inventory belonging to a Kentucky congressman, that just blew my mind. It just made it very real, and I just couldn't process it. It was a lot. It was years to really understand what I was doing, and I couldn't really do it. So when I went one year, I think it was around 2014, 2015, I did go to where my family was enslaved in Mount Sterling, Kentucky, which is about 40 miles outside of Lexington, and it looks very much probably like it did then. It's not a developed area. A lot of people, there's farmland and people who raise horses. It's horse country. So I was just really struck, you know, how beautiful it was, and like there's goldenrod going everywhere, but I was also struck by just how ugly it was at the same time. You know, because this beautiful space had the ugliest history. So I went down there with my iPhone at that time, it was like 2014, 2015, and I didn't have, they didn't have the wide angle lenses they have now. I bought the Zeiss lens attachment for my iPhone and attached it with this big contraption to my iPhone and filmed it, because I knew I wanted to do something with it. It might not have been like a film or whatever, but I wanted to hold that memory and be able to have other people in my family see it. And so, I was at Slack, and I wasn't as inspired by the working environment, leading like high-end magazine production like the New York Times, working at a tech company, editorializing marketing content, and so I was just getting that urge to create and also digest what I had learned with my family history. So I took a video essay class at San Francisco Art Institute, and it wasn't just a basic film class, learn how to make a video, it was a theory class as well, like heavy theory, heavy philosophy class. And so it really helped us dig deeper into why we were making these films and questioning constantly. And it was wonderful. So the first day I showed up with a big box of archival documents that included actually some original documents that mentioned my enslaved ancestors that I was able to purchase, which is a whole other story. And then that film footage. And I just told the teacher, I'm like, I have all this stuff, I don't know, I want to make a film because I just want to be able to like have people see what's possible, like what you can find. It's very hard for African Americans and marginalized communities to find this kind of information about their ancestry. So I took this class, and the result was this film called The Call. I'm not going to show any videos tonight because we're having an issue with the links, but I'll make them available. There's tons of stills in this slideshow, so I'll show you those. But the first film I ever made, it was The Call. It is inspired by the large volume of letters written to northern newspapers, especially the Chicago Defender, and other newspapers that were circulated throughout the South, calling people to move north during the Great Migration. And so I have, it's pure speculation because I don't have a lot of the family stories and photographs. So I made this story up. It's a bit of world building to try to kind of connect to an actual reality and time in my ancestors and fill in the gaps. So I created this fictional ancestor, Anna, and she is crossing, she's leaving Kentucky, and I'm going to show you something. Let me just start actually. So she's leaving Kentucky, and she is going to Chicago, crossing the Ohio River. And she's writing the Chicago Defender. It starts off, "Dear Chicago Defender," like many of these letters did that people wrote, telling her, saying why she's leaving, where she's planning on going, and she's asking for advice, like so many people did. And as she's writing these, as the film is going on, while this letter is being read as a voiceover that I'm reading, there is video footage of where my family was enslaved, so you can see a little piece of it there. And then this is one of the original documents that was that I own now that documents my family's history. There is another one that had a name on it, but this one, it just is from, I'm forgetting what year. It says the number of like 13 blacks, 5 horses, and they had some acres and part of the acreage on the other side that's cut off there, and the total value. And so this was just like a tax record that people were given every year. And so I'm gonna click through. So she's writing this letter. Okay, so as she's writing this letter, like there's some images of people who have migrated as she's asking these questions, and I included archival photographs to show actual life. And like I love this photograph. I think it was somewhere in Pennsylvania, like how it's shown. It's from 1919, an integrated scene of people who had recently migrated, working in this like northern business, and how it's a very integrated company, and I just love how at peace they all look. And then there's like a side image of the Ohio River standing from Kentucky, and then it goes. It's when the person is on the boat, and Anna's on the boat actually crossing the Ohio River, leaving Kentucky in the background there, and going toward Ohio. And as she's crossing the Ohio River on this boat, she's getting toward the end of the letter, and she said, I just want to leave, I just want to forget this place. And every time she does that, it will glitch. And every time she says something like leave or forget, the video footage will glitch. And she says it a couple times, and to the point that it completely fractures, and she's doing her sign off, please don't publish this letter, which is a lot of those letters did end this way, because that could be dangerous for some people who are still living in the South, knowing that having people know their plan to leave, because the violence was happening toward people who were trying to leave, because people did not want the system to change, and they knew the opportunities that were north. So she says her name, and as she says her name sincerely, Anna, like as she's saying her name, there's a loud scratch and a loud glitch sound, and it just goes blank, so you don't even get to hear her. And at that moment, that glitch is creating a fracture in the memory, and the fact that story, that migration story, was cut off in my family's lineage. The fact that we didn't even know if we were from Kentucky. We knew certain stories that we came to Chicago in the late 1800s, but we didn't know the specifics, especially Kentucky, at all. So I just wanted to find a way to visualize that, and so someone suggested I submitted this to something because they were moved by it, and I submitted it to a couple places in San Francisco, and some people said, submit it to these like film festivals across, different cities across the country, and I did, including the Black Star, which is one of the biggest film festivals in the country now. And there was like a big HBO premiere, it was wild, and I was like, you know what, it resonated, or just I realized that I was actually for the first time able to process that turbulent, really traumatic history that I've been studying for 20 or so years. And this was my new calling, and making this and talking to people about it and having it screen in all these different places, I felt like a release each time. And that was me processing it. And so I realized this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I went to grad school, and so I do want to talk a little bit about the glitch and what that means to me. It means everything to me. I didn't even know I didn't have words for why it was so important for me to have that fracture in the footage, in the video, to represent disconnect in that way. And so when I was in grad school, I went to California College of the Arts to get my MFA. My one advisor, and I showed her the film, I'm like, I'm not sure why I'm so drawn to this, and she's like, did you ever hear this book called Glitch Feminism? And I was just like, no. It just came out a month ago. The timing was beyond perfect. And I read it. It's a small book written by Legacy Russell, who was former curator of the Studio Museum in Harlem, and now is a curator at the Kitchen in New York. Incredible historian and curator, and it changed my life. So I'm going to start out, before I get to her definition, I do want to start off with the Oxford English Dictionary. One thing I learned in grad school, especially those of us who are very text-based and archival-based, is, look up the words of things. Look at the definitions, look at the roots, really understand. And I was told, always go to the Oxford English Dictionary to start. And so I always do that. So here, the noun, a surge, a current, or a spurious electrical signal. Also an extended use, a sudden, short-lived irregularity in behavior. As a verb, intransitive, to experience a glitch, setback, or malfunction, to go wrong. Also occasionally transitive, to cause something to experience a glitch. So for Legacy's book, click that a little too high, harder. Come on. Okay, here we go. So, Legacy Russell's book, Glitch Feminism. The etymology of glitch finds its deep roots in Yiddish glitchen, to slide, glide, slip, or the German, forgive my pronunciations, glitchen, to slip. Glitch is thus an active word, one that implies movement and change from the outset. This movement triggers error. Herein lies the paradox. Glitch moves, but glitch also blocks. It incites movement while simultaneously creating an obstacle. Glitch prompts and also prevents. With this, glitch becomes a catalyst, opening up new pathways, allowing us to seize new directions. And when I read that, I was just like, that's it. Like, that's completely articulating what I'm trying to do. And I recognize now that the glitch appears in my work in many different forms. For me, the glitch, let me just go back really quick. I'm really pressing this button, it's kind of hard. Okay, so for me, how I'm using the glitch is just, something I jotted down. It's for the release, the recovery, imminent loss of a moment in time, or even a glimpse into the future. To disrupt expected narratives and imagery, making space for my own story and the stories of others who were told they didn't quite fit. I'm obsessed with this word. It's completely changed my life. And like I said, I don't even recognize that I'm doing that. It's just how I'm able to access information from a family whose ancestry was cut off. I see these moments of time. I see these moments in time that it could be just even like a fraction of a second, but that is everything that is seen in that fraction of a second. And so that's the beginning of the discussion of the glitch. So one of the films I wanted to talk about that came after, this was in 2022, Elegy for Nancy. This is when I start glitching the body, like focusing on time and place a bit. So Elegy for Nancy, it's a video installation that was at the Museum of the African Diaspora in San Francisco. It's a Smithsonian affiliate. I had a solo show there I got their Emerging Artist Award, one of the awards that they give for that, so you get a solo show. And it's my attempt to pay homage to my oldest known ancestor, a woman named Nancy, who was born in the 1770s or 80s, likely in Virginia before migrating to Kentucky, where she was enslaved. And it appears based on the timeline and documentation that she was likely at Fort Boonesboro with Daniel Boone and that crew. There were a few Black people there and very few women. And before, my art practice was dealing mostly with my male ancestors, which was fine. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that I'm only focusing on male ancestors. It was just the information I had. But now I realize why I was so struck when I saw Nancy, because when I learned about who she was, because it was men, they're documented more. Like, even when the history of enslavement ended, there was a time when Black people could vote right after the Civil War. And so I saw my third time's great-grandfather Martin. I saw his records, his voting records. I saw he was listed in the, I forgot what they called them, but kind of like not their version of the phone book, like the residency books or something. So it was always his name, and then the census record, like he had a job, so it was easy to track the kind of work he was doing. But it's hard to track the women. And when I saw her, it all of a sudden occurred to me, like, I don't know anything about the women. So I wanted to pay tribute to her. So I knew I had I had to turn my attention to her when I discovered her identity, following all these 19th century manuscripts. And so I incorporate the texture of Super 8 film footage and archival film footage to do this, and incorporate multiple rivers, including the Sacramento, Ohio, and Ogun rivers. Ogun is in Nigeria, as guides to evoke healing, creation, and ancestral legacy. And the reason I incorporate rivers, there's so much action taking place in the rivers in this video, is it's also an offering, and Oshun is the goddess of the rivers. And I wanted to show different rivers connected to my ancestry. So I will show a couple of the important things. So this is a moment, like this is my 4K footage. In this film, a lot of my things I do, and I'm just trying to learn to let go a little bit, I film everything myself for certain things. Especially with this film, I filmed entirely. So the film footage of me, it's like I propped up a camera somewhere by the Sacramento River, because I'm this film, I'm actually baptizing myself in the tradition in the Baptist tradition. And I grew up Episcopalian, so also that was also kind of big news when I found a newspaper article about an ancestor, my great grandmother when she died in a car accident in the 1940s, she and her husband were buried, and it said like the name of the Baptist minister, and that was like, what? And I'm like, we're Black people and Episcopalians. There had to be a new thing happened at some point. If you're from the South, at some point, you're going to be Baptist if you're Black, most likely. Anyway, so I'm trying to connect to that because it always was so foreign. My dad was Baptist but not practicing, and I was trying. So I go to this river to baptize myself, and then attempt to connect to that side of my lineage. So here I am, 4K footage of me on the left, and on the right is Super 8 footage of the Ohio River. So I'm at the Sacramento on the right, and the left, Ohio River on the right, and then I glitch myself. So the footage is all static, but I'm just glitching. It stays put, and I just went into Premiere and I just glitched my body. Just used some technical stuff and found a way. And I didn't have any background in this. I went to grad school, but I went for grad school at that point. Like it's more theory based. They're not teaching you skills, so it's just like you have to learn stuff or take a undergrad class. So technical things like this I learned on my own. But for me, it was important for me to glitch the body because I was trying to show that my attempt, and I recognized that I was being clumsy at trying to connect to baptism. I was trying to connect to the Baptist faith. I was recognizing that this was very foreign to me, but I really wanted that connection that was so opposite of the high Episcopal church I was raised in. High Episcopal is a bit more conservative, more ritualistic, and just very different. Like I said, some people say Catholic light. But I wanted to show how kind of my clumsy attempt to show that sincerity of it, which is also why I wanted to also be there completely by myself and film that, because it was a very private, real moment I was doing. I was documenting me, was literally trying to baptize myself. And so I think that's the only footage I have from this. Like I said, we don't have the links. We can't play the video links, but I can send those to people later on. But I also incorporate archival footage from, like I said, the Ogun River from the 1930s, and the woman, which I love, I captured. Because first I was trying to find archival footage from a Black filmmaker from Africa, like at the Ogun River, or a river in West Africa. But I could only find footage captured by white media. So I was like, okay, how do I embrace this? Because I'm always trying to reclaim narratives. So there was this incredible scene I saw in one video of this woman who is just kind of, she's standing up in a boat, and she's just pushing the boat, and she turns, her back is to the camera, and all of a sudden she turns and she just holds a stare for, 5 to 8 seconds. And it is just amazing, her gaze, she's just returning that gaze back. That gaze was everything. She was really taking control in that moment. I know you're watching me, and I'm gonna watch you right back. And it was amazing, the power that I found in that. I'm like, okay, this is it. This is the footage I'm gonna use of the Ogun River. And there's also archival footage from this incredible businessman named Sir Solomon Jones. I can get that information and send it to you. But he was a very wealthy person from Oklahoma, very wealthy Black man who had a 16mm camera in the late 20s. And he was traveling the world in the late 20s and in the 30s. He was very wealthy. He even has footage from Switzerland and things. But he lived in Oklahoma, and he had some footage of those water baptisms. And it was just incredibly beautiful. These people walking from a church and then each going one at a time to the river and having me baptized and having me dunked backwards. And that's what I do to myself. I go backwards. And I had one take to do it, and I could have, you can just see the hesitancy. I was not trying to be, there was a moment I was thinking, okay, Trina, this is, you're gonna baptize yourself. And it's gonna be like this, and it's gonna be very glamorous and movie-like. But I'm like, that's not what this was about. It was literally about me trying to connect and knowing that this is a clumsy way of doing it. because I'm just doing anything desperately to try to connect to my ancestors. So that's some of the archival footage that's in that video. And so then just a couple things. There's a 3-channel video that I made. It originally started out like this, 3 channels. I wanted to experiment and learn how to, so that's 3 streams. It's called 3-channel, like experiment in storytelling and get a little bit more complex with my storytelling. So this is how it started out. When I was like in grad school, I got bored and I showed it like this. Then a year later, if I can click, it was like this in a space called Minnesota Street Project. This is an intermedia room. So I made an immersive video. We did not know it was going to be as intense as it was when we installed it, because the room is quite small. So when we were, I fought for this. We had some issues, like getting the 3 projectors up and all this. People were like, no, Trina, you're just gonna have to make this one. I was like, no, we're gonna do this. And it like took forever. And I think during the opening is when we got it like set. But it just changed my life, because when we got it to kind of work and we sat in the space, it's a tiny space that you are completely immersed by this video. And so basically this piece started out as a 3-channel video. It started out as a 3-channel audio piece, like sound piece, but then I ended up putting some imagery with it of me in Kentucky, also me in Senegal. When I went to Senegal, I took a trip where people had taken DNA tests. We went to Senegal to kind of to trace our roots through food. It was like a food ancestry tour. So we're learning about our ancestors through what kind of foods they were eating and the ingredients, and going to markets and meeting with chefs and learning about the ingredients that were brought here and the recipes that were brought here, like jollof rice, how that's gumbo, and like all of these different things. And I saw the ancestor, or the forerunner of the black-eyed pea, and all these wonderful things. So I'm not going to go too much into it, but this is it was very a life-changing moment to be able to, and this is when I realized I wanted to start moving to installation work, because I couldn't believe that feeling of because it's so immersive, it's such a small room, you really feel transported when that video was playing and people kept telling me how they felt. So now I want to just keep continuing, creating an experience and build a world for people to walk in and be able to go into what I'm thinking and what my ancestors were feeling. So this is this movie, Uncoded. But again, it's stretching, is again playing with time. I'm trying to imagine what my ancestors. Well, additionally, I do want to say, I initially said when I made this, the first version, I said that I wanted to recreate. I wanted people to see what my ancestors had seen. I wanted to show people what my ancestors had seen. And this brilliant filmmaker in San Francisco, who was an advisor of mine, and I was their TA at CCA, said, "Why? I don't see enough of you in this. You will never see what your ancestors have seen. You got to know that." And they are from Layla Weaver, an incredible artist, filmmaker, said, they were from Liberia. Their dad is Liberian. Their mom is from Oakland, and they said, when I go to Liberia, I don't see what my parents see. We're looking at the same thing, but we're seeing completely different things. And that was it. She's like, play with the tension. You don't want to try to pretend like you're making something that your ancestors have seen. Play with that tension of not knowing, and the fact that you will never know that. And so that changed everything. And so this film changed my life in many ways, but it was just incredible just to be in that space. So this is another film I was going to show, but again, I can send links to people. This is a video installation. Again, I'm moving to bigger and bigger video installations now. This, again, the glitch appears, how I'm showing the footage I use. So this film, Go West, is a 2-parter. There's Go West, and then there's Lacombe, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Go West is about moving away from the history of enslavement, because that's one thing I'll talk a little bit about. I do talk a lot about that in my work, but then I want to talk about migration stories. I want to talk about the hope and drive people had, and the dreams that we had, and just like Black people just hanging out, you know, and like leisure. So this was about the migration west that so many people had, that desire to go west. African Americans did too, you know. And so what I use, I'm trying to capture that unique feeling of of Western migration. And so I had, it's mostly archival footage, found footage that I found of like different families and people from like the 50s and 60s moving west, or like their lives in the West, or you know, like archival footage. And then I end with this footage that I filmed with my camera, my 4K Blackmagic digital camera of Morey Point, which is a part of San Francisco right on the edge. We're part of, Pacifica near San Francisco, right at the ocean, and I just imagine what it must have felt like to leave like the middle of the United States, leaving the South or leaving the Midwest, and then seeing this incredible ocean, especially like during like a bloom of all these wildflowers, and like wondering like, okay, is this what freedom feels like? Is this what you were hoping for? Are you satisfied in that? So I asked these questions at the end of the video. Is this what freedom feels, looks, sounds, smells, you know, all the senses like? And then on the bottom of that video, beneath are 3 CRT TVs, which they're showing glitched footage from Kentucky that I shot. So it's glitched footage from where my family was enslaved, but also glitched footage from a beautiful place, Berea, where my second-time great-grandfather, where my great-great-grandfather went to college from 1868 to 1872, and I included that because I wanted people to be able to see it's not just the tragic moments that were cut off. There was beauty when you're having those like traumatic moments that you need to cut off your past. You do cut off some of the most beautiful things as well, and like we were blown away. Like you go to Berea, like the grade books are still there. I got to see the grades he got at Berea in 1868. It's incredible, like they're archived at Berea College. And so they're sitting on a field of goldenrod. I worked with, like materiality is very important to me. Like every single thing I'm using, it has to have meaning. It's sitting on a field of goldenrod, which is the Kentucky state flower. And I worked with somebody who foraged the goldenrod for me in Kentucky and sent it to me. We've worked on a few shows together. I'll show you in a minute something else we worked on. And so she foraged it for me and sent it to me, and I created this whole field of goldenrod that I was talking about earlier, how like I went to where my family was enslaved, and it was so beautiful, especially with the goldenrod when it was being hit by the sun. It was just gorgeous. It was so ugly because how could beauty really live there? It was like it was a real mind game experiencing that. So I wanted people to be able to see this beautiful field of goldenrod. So this is the part 1. The reason, one thing I want to call out, because I want to have some more stuff I want to talk about. I was saying how also the glitch appears in this. So I shot this footage with my Blackmagic 4K camera, which is digital, very high resolution. But this is supposed to be the past. I'm talking about the migration of African Americans to California. And that video footage is people, you know, when they get to California, they're in their backyards, you know, like planting their flowers, they're playing on the beach. It's just like, we're just hanging out and having fun. Again, I don't want people to always associate African Americans with pain. Like, we have a lot of joy, we love to relax just like everyone else. We had that American dream, and I was showing African Americans reaching that American dream of moving to California. But like I said, I shot it on 4K, and I wanted to have this in conversation with the past, in memory. So what I did, I didn't have time to like reshoot anything. I sent that 4K footage to a place called Metropolis Post in New York, and it's a very well-known film place. They work with big budget and small budget. Don't discriminate in the budget as long as you pay them. And I sent it to them, and what they did is they took the digital footage, they printed it to film, and then they colored it, and then I'm forgetting how the order. But anyway, they printed it to film, and then they scanned it back to digital for me, so I could show and have that texture of memory. So when I say scanned it to film, 16 millimeter was what I requested. Like, are you sure you don't want 35? I'm like, no, I want that grain. I still don't want it to look perfect and clear. I want it to be 16 millimeter. And so I went through all that extra just to get that texture of memory. I wanted people to be very rooted in the past. So this was the first part. So imagine when my parents got here, we did an outdoor performance and screening of this film as well. There was a program called Go West, African American Lives in the Westward Migration, and so we did an outdoor screening on the Southeast Community Center in Bayview in San Francisco, which is I think it's the most diverse neighborhood in all of San Francisco. It's a large African American population, but lots of people, different backgrounds from there. So we screened it on the building at night, and we had a live musician playing the trumpet and an improvisational dancer dancing to his music while the video is being screened. And it was amazing. It was so much work. It was one of the hardest things I've ever seen. I think it's because I lived in New York for so long, and I have really high expectations of what I've seen. Creatively, I'm I want to do this, and this is one of the hardest things I've ever done. And even they said that people put it on at San Francisco Art Commission, they're like, that was really great, we're never gonna do it again. But that was one of the best things we've ever done, because it was hard to bring all these people together and get that. Oh my God! But it was magic. So that was part one. The next was called Lacombe, which is another installation. So this is part two. So it picks up at that same point where we leave off at the beach at Mooring Point. But this time it's the 4K footage because it's me. It's the modern time me. Now, it starts with those questions again. What does freedom look, feel, sound? All the senses. And it starts with that and opens with me with those wildflowers, and it goes to me on the beach. And I say, there's a voiceover, I'm still asking these questions. So it's I've come to the edge of the earth. But it says, we've come to the edge of the earth, and I'm still asking this. And yeah, am I satisfied? Were my ancestors satisfied when they went here with all the other people? Was everything all of a sudden magically amazing? At that time, I had so many questions because I'm from Oak Park, but like I said, half of my family, a lot of them have been in California since 1906. They would bop back and forth. So when I came to California, I kind of had this whole thing the California thing, I'm here, but I was still not feeling satisfied in terms of identity and connecting to my ancestry. So Lacombe starts off going to Cameroon. I'm at the beach asking that question, and I go to Cameroon, which is what I did. When I went, in 2023, I went to Cameroon, and we had this incredible naming ceremony. I've been to Africa twice. I've been 3 times, but West Africa twice. The first time I did have a naming ceremony in Senegal, and it was okay. It was not what I thought it was going to be. It was just because that is very big now for people, for African Americans and people from the diaspora to go to where they've traced their ancestry to in West Africa. But and there's a market for that. You meet a chief, they give you an African name, you get a certificate, it's a photo op, you shake your hands with the chief. This is kind of now what it's turned into. But it's still amazing that they do this and there are all these opportunities. But Cameroon, we had this little situation happen. It was we left, we as a big group, and we broke groups. And the group I left with, some of them still wanted that naming ceremony, and I was I don't care, because I did that already. But they ended up, they couldn't get that kind of a situation that we had before. They found a guy who didn't speak English. He was a local healer and does naming ceremonies for the people who actually are from the community. He was in Kribi, in Cameroon, in the Kribi forest. And so he took us to this forest. We had the English translators okay, you guys can't bring film, cameras, any kind of camera. You guys have to go one at a time. I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. He's going to take you to the water because he doesn't speak English. So you're going to go to the water. He wants you to put the water over your head, and then he's gonna. He wants you to also splash your face. And then he wants you to get up, go to this tree, walk around the tree 7 times, and then when you do that, you're going to hold onto the tree and say everything you want to leave there and everything you want to bring back with you. And then that's when he'll have the name for you. And so it was one of the most transformative experiences I've ever had. I could not believe how next level it was because he was watching you. And then when we left, he stayed and continued to do work. Because we thought, well, okay, we're done, and he's like, oh, they're like, oh no, he's gonna be here for a few more hours. Because he had to seal, you know, it was an actual, he was the real thing, and it was so transformative. So I made this film with Coom to kind of recreate that, and it's 4K for the most part footage, because it's me in the present going there. I do include some archival footage, and oh my goodness, oh there we go. So that's me at Maury Point on the beach. That's Maury Point. The 4K footage in California. God, oh, I went too far. Okay, so then so it's a 2-channel video. Like I said, I love doing multiple channels because it's like really, it's a lot of fun playing with time. So one channel is me preparing, going through just the motions of, not the motions, but just the story, the main story. The other channel is basically, it's me making ink out of soil I collected in Cameroon. And this is like this form of alchemy that I'm performing. And then it gets to the naming ceremony. And so this is when I'm screaming, when I'm trying to leave behind. And what I did, again, this is another thing I filmed completely by myself. It was just really hard to film by myself because, again, it was a very sacred moment to me. I did not want other people to be there. And I was recreating, I filmed some of it in Cameroon, but this scene I found a place where there were palm trees, this isolated area in California, right above Oakland. And so this is where that moment when I'm screaming. The one thing I did want to not include, I thought it was very important to not include literally like what I'm saying, like what I'm choosing to let go and what I'm choosing to bring back with me, because I found that to be very sacred, and that's one thing I did not want to, I wanted to keep that private. And so there is audio over this though, because I was recording when I was there, the guy who was telling us what was gonna happen, our guide, I recorded him talking about what was happening, so all the steps that he's telling us what we're gonna do, I do those steps in the video. So it's he's basically narrating what I'm doing, because he's preparing us, because the healer didn't speak English. So I just recorded that. And then on the other channel, it's showing again like the process of making the ink with the soil, and then again, like this is when another scream when I'm screaming, and then one thing I wanted to include, because this is supposed to be that moment, this is when I'm living in the glitch, and I wanted people to see that because that moment like literally changed my life. I know that time and space, like I really do feel like I was transported to a different moment. It was so surreal and deep. There were no words, so I knew I had to document it in some way. And so I'm using light leaks from Super 8 footage I shot once when I was in Ohio, Kentucky. So a light leak is, it's like this flip of color, it's a mistake, but I love to play with mistakes. And so I slowed it down to like 8 seconds, and when there was no actual footage being captured, so it's just the light leaks. And so you just see that whole section is just me, it's this overlay of these light leaks just appearing, and so you get this kind of very ethereal, wild, dreamlike state, because it was just next level. And again, the other screen is showing me preparing me about to write my name, and I'm writing on my handmade paper that I make, and then, why am I so bad at this? Okay, and so then like, again, this me and alchemy, but then, so this is that moment I was talking about in the class earlier today. That's when like everything came together. So I was just trying to capture these light leaks, because I just want to try to create this moment. But there was one point in the editing process when the editor captured a little bit of the footage of the Ohio River. So this was that Super 8 light leak footage was when I was filming the Ohio River, and it happened for just like a moment. But there was a moment that showed up, and there's still a light leak happening, where you see the Ohio River, and so that was it was an amazing moment of that Ohio River being shown while I'm recreating that naming ceremony moment when I'm walking around the tree. And so I flipped out when I saw that, because that was just an insane, incredible accident, because it was just like time had just, I still don't even have words for it. It was just like time overlapped, And literally that experience felt like that. It's like there's different moments of time coming together at one moment, and it was beautiful. So that was again like being in the glitch, and I created, like, when it was shown at YBCA, Area 9, I wanted people to come. It was in this dark meditative space, and I wanted the people to come and be in that space and be immersed and come into the glitch with me. That was like an invitation, but that like blew my mind. Because that was a mistake, and I'm like, oh, she did cut it out, like, because I did my first version of edits, and then I worked with an editor to kind of clean up, and so she put this in accidentally, and then she took it out. I was like, oh, no, put that back, because that's the whole film, and this one, like, 3-second moment that you see in the film. This is it right here. Okay, so I want to move on a little bit because I know I'm getting time, so I want to talk about one of the more, this one piece that's really important I talked about in class. This is a part of that installation. Like, I make my own paper. I look at that as a form of alchemy. I meant to bring them with me. They're in my hotel, but I work with raw cotton. Often, I make paper out of raw cotton from a black-owned farm as a form of reclaiming the material. And I also work with, I bought back palm fronds, like, leaves from a palm tree, and I make paper from that as well. And so it's like another form of the importance of materiality to me. I can't just use regular paper anymore. Like, I need to work with everything. It really does need to be as closely connected to my ancestry as possible. And I brought back an entire suitcase of palm fronds. And that was some trauma, but like I make these, I work, before I go to the bigger piece, I want to talk about these though, just for a second. So these are copper photogravures. The reason I love working with this process, I first started doing intaglio, I'll show you some of those, intaglio etching with using photopolymer plates, because that was the most easily accessible. It's a form of etching. I love that process because it's a form of mark making. So a memory won't be lost, but I also love photopolymer and photogravure because you're taking a photograph that you took and you're making a print of it, so you're taking a step back from that original sharp image. It's taking a step back and making a print and etching it into that paper, so that memory, again, like I said, will not be lost. It's a form of mark making. And that process is just so important to me because it's so much. To me, it feels like a memory. I'm able to capture a memory that way. I'm never going to see what my ancestors have seen, and so I'm trying my best to capture maybe something they might have seen and experienced, but that memory is what I'm trying to capture. And so it's very much in line with like the art movements, pictorialism, and the photo-secessionist movements, where people were trying to create more ethereal images, like painterly images. And trying to get away with an exact copy. So that's like the printmaking process that I primarily work with. And again, like etching is also a form of mark making, so these memories will no longer be lost. It's fixing it. So I want to talk about the last thing. Ooh, I'm terrible at this. Okay, here we go. I don't want to. So that's the photopolymer. This is the main thing I want to talk about. The last thing I'm going to talk about. So this has been traveling. This is going to be it was just at ICA San Jose. This is Liberation Through Redaction, which is the title of the lecture. This is what started a lot for me. This is what it looked, this is a quote I often use for it, so before I go on. So Liberation Through Redaction is a 2-page document that lists from 1834, 35, somebody who enslaved my ancestors. It's his will. And among other things, he lists when all my ancestors were going to be freed, and his other slaves, when they'd be freed. And one thing I want to call, it seems really great because he was going to free them, but he freed them pretty much all when they were 45, and at that time, that is old. So he wasn't really doing anything. He was just kind of like, I don't want you anymore. So it's like, anyway. But not everyone did that, so I'll give him that. Okay. Anyway, so it's this 2-page document that lists when all my ancestors were going to be freed. And before I talk about this quote, I will just show you what it looks like fully, and I'll come back to this. I'm a bad clicker. Okay. So this is what it looked like at ICA San Jose. So it's this 2-page document. It's called Liberation Through Redaction. So what I did is it started when a professor of mine was saying, I was a CCA, and I was talking a lot about my enslaved ancestors, but I also wanted to talk about migration stories, like I was talking about the California migration. And one of my professors was just like, oh, no, you should focus on slavery, because that's what people want to hear. I'm like, oh, no, but I have all these other stories, you know, my family, like, they did some, like, really cool, wild stuff, and there's other people's migration stories. And she was like, no, that is what's really popular right now, that you need to focus on slavery. And which is really gross and violent, especially in a classroom with other students. I was just like, what are you talking about? So I'm like, okay, you want slavery? I'll give you slavery. And so I made this piece. It's printed on paper I got from a Black-owned, it's printed from cotton I got at the Black-owned farm. So I made a very laborious process of making the paper. I did the photopolymer process of etching. I'll show you some process shots. If I can do this, if I can navigate. So this is like me, oh my goodness. Now I'm able to click really fast. Okay. So this is like the cotton, example of the cotton that I had, and this, you know, when I was like taking the seeds out, which was another very transformative process I won't go into right now. It was a very incredible, painful moment of like me running late, trying to pick the seeds out of the cotton, and I got started on the project late, and then I'm like third day into it, me as myself a post deadline, my hands are really hard and like red and sore, and then it just hit me like, this is what my ancestors had to go through, and I'm like freaking out because I'm just procrastinating. Can you imagine if you had an actual quota and a deadline you had to meet? And this was like some self-imposed problem that I was making. So anyway, so this is the actual cotton. This is when because you have to cook it, and then and then you have to beat it to make it. You can't use a blender if you're using a fiber. You have to use like something called a Hollander beater. It's a big machine. So then I also, when I got the pulp, I put coffee in it to have it to dye it a little bit. So it had like a vintage look to the paper, and then, ooh, see, I go too fast. Okay, so then like I'm pulling the sheets, and then that's the final sheet. And then, so this is, that's for liberation through redaction. What I did is I had, I got twine, and I got like the sisal from Zimbabwe. I couldn't find anything from West Africa, so I did find some from Zimbabwe. I took hibiscus that I got in Senegal, in Dakar to market, the hibiscus flower, I should say, and I used that to represent the blood and DNA of my ancestors, and I dyed it. And I also, part of the process, I had dried cedar for making ink. I incorporated soil from Senegal, dried cedar, charred cedar, I should say. And this is like me charring it. And then this is the photopolymer plate I used to make that etched document. And so just showing you some process shots. And let me go back, so we don't need to go to that. So this is just so you can see how this came to be. So what I ended up doing was, so I dyed that, I dyed the twine, and I loved the twine because it had this wild look. And I embroidered it, but with a back stitch. And the reason I wanted, so I embroidered it. And then, this is where the redaction comes into place. I redacted every word that had nothing to do with my ancestors' humanity. And so there's hardly any text that's visible, except for the words like, for my third time great-grandfather, the man Martin Free. And so what I was trying to do when I told her, if you want slavery, I'll give you my take on this, their humanity was never taken. They always had their humanity. This is some self-imposed thing that you try to put on us. But by redacting every other word that had nothing to do with their humanity, and just having words like the man Martin Free, the woman Charlotte Free, about like 12 people through this document. It's actually originally a 3-page document, but I used the 2 pages where they mentioned the enslaved people. That is completely restoring their humanity, because they always had that throughout that entire moment. They were survivors, and I try to look at and frame, I want people to change how they talk about slavery in this country, the history of enslavement. They were survivors. All of their names need to be learned and recognized. They are more, Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass were incredible, but they were not the only 2 incredible people. Everyone who survived was incredible. I mean, there was like a hell on earth built for us, and we came out on the other side and built, while going through all that, built all of these buildings, built economies. When slavery ended, the Southern economy crashed. You know, like the forced labor. You know, and like anyway, I can go on. I know I'm pushing time, but anyway. So one thing I wanted to call out with this document is some of the close-up shots. There's like some moments where it looks like there's these clean, wonderful lines, and there are moments where, you know, I'm doing the back stitch, and I didn't poke holes. Like, you know, I did a lot of research before doing this, because a lot of people who do embroidery on paper, they get these little tiny holes, punch things, and so it's a nice, easy process to embroider. But I didn't want to do that, and I talked to this needleworking association, and they told me like the proper needle I should use, and I got that because I wanted just that violence. I wanted that violent tear to be evident. So there are moments where it's a perfectly clean, like embroidery moment, and then there are other moments where, like I said, you can see where it bunches up and like it starts to tear, and the twine starts to tear. Those are those moments where that fight for liberation. And like a friend of mine, or a professor of mine at CCA now, a friend, was like, it's almost like a piece, this is like code almost. It's like, and again, like that's where the glitch, this is like one of those glitch moments through that redaction, because like where it is like bunching, like those are those battles, and then it's like, okay, right now you think everything is cool? You think you got us? You think we're, you know, no. We're back, and we're gonna fight, and like we're always gonna maintain our humanity. But I wanted to show, like, again, that quote really quick, and I'll end with that. If I can go back. Oh my God, I'm so bad. I'm like the worst clicker person. Okay, here we go. So this quote, I always want, every time I show this, I have to have this quote included. It sums up everything for me. I first started reading Fred Moten when I was in grad. I was a TA for Layla Weaver, like that incredible artist I mentioned. And it was a Black Experimental Narratives class at CCA, a film class. And this quote from Fred Moten, the history of Blackness is a testament to the fact that objects can and do resist. Blackness, the extended movement of a specific upheaval, an ongoing eruption that rearranges every line, is a strain that pressures the assumption of the equivalence of personhood and subjectivity. And I'm obsessed with that, because that's what it is. Like, I don't know, that quote just, it means everything to me. You know, it's a specific upheaval, an ongoing eruption that rearranges every line. And that's like what the glitch is, and how I've been able to incorporate that into my art practice. And yeah, and I'm just really excited about like this new life as an artist I have, because I gave up my other life, and I have a whole other life after being able to experience and learn about my family history. So, thank you. And if there are any questions too. This is a time if people have questions, we can open up to a Q&A now. You know, whatever people have anything. I went over a little, sorry. If you don't, then that's totally cool. All right. Thank you guys for coming. This was fantastic. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation.